Pitch decks are useless, but the act of creating a well-crafted pitch deck can be priceless. If you are a startup founder and trying to get funding for your new venture, then you need a pitch deck that sizzles. And for once, AI is probably not the answer. So many founders fall flat on their face when it comes to creating a pitch deck, and this doesn't have to be you. In this video, I will walk through 12 pitch deck templates that have been used by some of the most highly funded startups of all time. One of these templates can help you to unlock millions of dollars in funding. Be sure to stay to the end when I share 7 criteria for selecting the right template for you and making it your own. Let's get into it. Many startup founders think that creating the perfect pitch deck is like a cheat code for getting funding. As you'll see as we walk through 12 highly successful templates, there are a lot that they all have in common, to be sure. But the act of thoughtfully constructing a well-crafted pitch deck is far more important than the actual slides. Putting in the hard work of developing a pitch deck can be the key to unlocking the true value of your offering and clarifying your business model and strategy. Also, in my experience, pitching frequently looks very different than what you'd see on Shark Tank. Investors often just want to have a dialogue about a venture, and they get concerned when a founder has to lean too heavily on prepared materials. Steve Jobs once said, "I hate the way people use slide presentations instead of thinking. People confront problems by creating presentations. I want them to engage, to hash things out at the table rather than show a bunch of slides." When it comes to startup pitch deck templates, if you do a simple Google search, you'll find tens of thousands of entries. When I did this recent search, I found over 52,000 results. But there are some pitch deck templates that are very popular, and so I'm going to focus on those today. And the top 12 are the ones I'm going to walk through. These include B plans for the makers of LivePlan, also Y Combinator, SlideBean, First Round Capital, Founder Institute, Brex.com, NFX.com, Sequoia Capital, Crunchbase, The Pitch Doctor, Guy Kawasaki's 10-20-30 model, and the LIP 4-point model. These are very popular frameworks that really point to the key things that every pitch deck needs to have. And when we look at these all together, you'll see that there are strengths and weaknesses of all of them. There are things that they have in common, and there are things that differentiate them from each other. I'll break these down for you here. There's 3 things to consider along the way. Number 1, what do they have in common? Number 2, how do they differ? And number 3, how would you decide which approach to take? Let's start with B plans. This particular pitch deck template was created by the producers of LivePlan software. This is an application produced by Palo Alto Software that's really designed to help founders to put their entire business plan together, particularly their financial forecasting and their strategy, in a way that they can quickly and easily present it to investors. And so they've come up with a pitch deck format that really brings this together and wraps around the app that they have to do this. So you're going to start with things like the vision and the value proposition. Next, they go to the problem. So what problem is it that you're trying to solve with your startup? Next, the target market and opportunity. How big is the market size and how big is the market opportunity? The larger it is, the more the company can be evaluated because they're going after a larger market. Then they go to the solution. So what is the offering that your startup is going to bring to the market? That's followed by the revenue model. Based on that offer, how are you expecting to make sales and what kinds of forecast expectations do you have in terms of the revenue coming into the company over time? Next is traction and validation. And this is really the roadmap, not only for the solution, but how you think it's going to be adopted by the market. And the more track record you have, the more viable this type of information is if you can show the actual traction rather than just forecasting that you're going to achieve the traction if you haven't started already. Next is marketing and sales strategy. How are you going to take the product to market and how are you going to find customers and convince them to buy the product? Next is the team. Who are you bringing to the table as part of the founder and co-founder team to actually create the solution and deliver it to customers? And what is it about that mix of people that's going to be a unique value for this particular startup? Next are the financials. This is a projection and the pro forma, looking ahead 3 to 5 years in terms of what's expected in terms of business growth. Next is competition. Who else is already operating in this space? Not just direct competitors, but it could also be alternatives or solutions that customers typically use today to address their problem that you maybe are hoping to disrupt and replace in the market. And finally, presenting the investment and use of funds. How much are you asking for? How do you plan to use the funds? And this starts to point to what the valuation is that you would be giving to the business that you're asking investors to believe in, so that when they make their investment and you choose the equity that they're going to gain for that investment, how much the business is really worth. Model number 2 is Y Combinator. Of course, Y Combinator, one of the most well-known accelerators that has produced some of the most disruptive startups of all time. They have a simpler model with just 10 slides, and they expect anyone who does a pitch in their accelerator to use this particular format. It's composed of first a title page that represents who the company is, the brand, and a tagline, and often is expected to actually show what the investment is that is being requested. Next, the focus is on the problem. What is the problem that the startup intends to fix in the world? Followed by a slide about the solution. How is the solution or the offering going to address that particular problem? Next is traction. How is it that the team expects to go out and get traction in the market? Can they prove that they've already started to get traction through a minimum viable product that's been tested in the market? Next, metrics. Key performance indicators that show that traction is being achieved, that the market is signaling that there's an interest in the offering that's being provided. Next is the special sauce. What is it about this particular startup that's unique that no one else can match or deliver? This is the secret sauce that's really being presented as this is why the business will be successful. Next is the business model. Looking at all the ways that customer value is going to be delivered, how you're going to engage with customers and generate revenue, and then ultimately the activities, the resources, and the partnerships that need to be in place to make the business a success. And these things drive the cost model. In this, you have the opportunity to see how the business is going to run, how it's going to bring value to customers, and whether or not it can be profitable. Next is the market. Sizing the market and determining how big the market is and how likely it is that the market is going to adopt this particular solution. Next, the team. Y Combinator puts a lot of emphasis on who the founder team is and why they're bringing unique value that is going to differentiate the company from others who might be trying to be successful in the same space. And finally, investment and use of funds. How much money is being requested? How are those funds going to be used to achieve the growth goals that are being forecast? The third pitch deck template is Slide Bean. And as you can see from this image, this one is very heavy, 24 slides recommended. Most of the slide templates discourage having this much information, but it gives you a pretty good idea of the kinds of things you need to convey to investors. So let's walk through it. First, the cover slide. Next, the traction teaser. Then the problem, the solution, the product, how it works, benefits, the technical infrastructure, market validation, the target audience, a case study, the business model, milestones and roadmap, traction, key performance indicators and unit economics, go-to-market strategy, potential outcomes, size of the market, competitors, the secret sauce, press and testimonials, the team, financial projections, and fundraising, the ask. How much is being asked? How's it going to be used? So as you can see here, they really haven't left out anything. And as we look at all the 12 models, you'll find that this one is probably the most comprehensive and covers almost everything that's in all the other models. The question is, do you have enough time? And is your investor, particularly in an early pitch, going to be willing to listen and walk through all of these different things? So this is one you'd have to decide whether it's the right thing. But you can see it definitely has a lot in common with all the other models because it includes so much. Number 4 is from First Round Capital. This one's simpler and resembles some of the earlier ones that we looked at. It starts with a title slide. Then it moves to the company purpose. And this is one where it actually looks at what is it the company's really trying to do and change in the world beyond just the particular problem that they're addressing now. Then it moves to the problem that you're going to focus on to start with and the solution. Traction becomes the next thing. How many people are going to buy it and how do you know? Why now? This is unique so far in the ones we've looked at because it really starts to look at the timing. Are there trends going on in the world right now that make it uniquely good timing for your business to enter the market? Next is market size. How big is the market? There's lots of ways you can present this. I like to use what's called the TAM, SAM, SOM model. Total available market, serviceable addressable market, and serviceable obtainable market. Next, this template calls for information about competitors. Who else is playing in this space? What are some of the alternatives that customers might use? Next, the business model. What is the business model that's going to be used to drive this particular business forward? The team, the founder, the co-founders, the key subject matter experts. Who are they? Why does it give this particular business idea an advantage? Next, financial projections. How much do you expect to sell and how soon do you expect to sell it? And last, what they call closing thoughts. So some kind of a clincher or closer that leaves a lasting impression in the minds of investors. Fifth is the Founder Institute. This organization's actually come up with 4 different templates to be used when a different focus is needed. And I won't go through the details of each one, but they have a problem solution template, a value opportunity template, a team template, and a traction template. These are comprised of basically the same slides, but there's a bit of a different emphasis, and you can see what it is just from the title of the template. So if you really have a specific way you want to approach it, one of these templates may be a good fit. Number 6 is from Brex.com. This one starts with the value proposition. How are you addressing a customer's pain or providing them with a gain? From there, it goes to the problem. What is the specific problem that you're solving? And then what is your solution? Next is the market opportunity. How big is the opportunity and how much do you think that you can gain from it by bringing your product to market? Next is the business model. So really connecting that customer value to the way that you're going to deliver that value in the market and how you're going to generate profitable revenue. Next is traction. How do you expect to gain traction in the market and make sales? This is then founded on your marketing strategy. So how are you going to approach the market in terms of messaging, in terms of positioning, pricing, and so forth? Next is competition. Who are the competitors and the alternatives in the market that are likely going to draw or try to draw attention from the same customers? Then the team members. Who is it that you're bringing to the table and why does that make the company different? And finally, the ask. How much money are you looking for? What are you going to use that money for? And how much equity are you willing to exchange for it? Number 7 is from NFX. Their focus is on creating and crafting the perfect pitch story. And they have a 12 slide deck format that starts with a cover page, then goes into the team, then the problem and opportunity. Next, the product, then the big vision, particularly why now. Then the market size, total available market. Then the business model. Next, traction metrics. How will you measure success? Next, competition. Then defensibility. So how is this particular idea going to be defensible in terms of other solution? Also, network effects. How is it that you're going to really make it into the market leveraging networks? Next, a roadmap and financials that show the viability of the company. Then a summary with the key points to remember. Finally, an appendix that really answers the tough questions and provides a deeper analysis. These are usually there so that the founder can draw on them if there are questions during the pitch or after the pitch, but they're not necessarily going to include them in their presentation. However, this appendix would become part of the deck that's presented either prior to the pitch presentation or as a follow-on after the pitch presentation. Number 8 is from Sequoia Capital, and this is the template that they ask all of their founders to use if they're going to be coming in to pitch for capital with their organization. It starts with the customer's problem. From there, it moves to the solution. What is this startup saying that they'll do to address that problem? Why now? What is it about this particular point in time? What trends are occurring? What's happening in the world that makes now the best time for this solution to come to market? Then market size. How big is the opportunity? How likely is it that this particular startup can take advantage of that opportunity? Then competition. Who else is on the field and what are the chances are that this startup can improve upon what they're doing or do something that's going to be better in the eyes of customers? Next, the product. What is it? How does it work? Why will people want to buy it? Followed by the business model. So how is it that customers are going to connect with value and relationship? How is that going to generate revenue? And how is the company going to deliver that value in a profitable way? Next, the team. Who is it that you're bringing to the table to make things go? And what is it about that team that differentiates the organization? This one's uncommon compared to some of the others, but who's on the board? Who are the advisors? What experts have contributed their expertise and thoughts and perspective to the founders and the founder team? Next, financials. How strong are the numbers? How likely is the startup and the founder team to actually achieving the numbers that they're proposing? And finally, fundraising, the ask. What is it that you're asking for in terms of investment? What is it that you project that you'll be able to do with that money? How are you going to use it? And ultimately, how much equity are you willing to give up for it? Template number 9 is from Crunchbase. This one's pretty straightforward, but it calls for a title slide. The trends and conditions that are happening that makes it a good time for your product to come to market. The market opportunity itself. Why is there a problem that you can address? The size of the market in the form of a TAM, SAM, SOM. Then traction. How do you expect to gain traction in the market? And as a result, the financials. What do the financials look like? Then competition. Who else is competing in this space and how can you differentiate from them? And finally, the team. Template number 10 is from the Pitch Doctor. They claim it to be a meta structure that works for almost any investor presentation. And it really intends to separate the opportunity story from the business story. So let's go in a little deeper on this one. So the opportunity story is really about the customer. It's the story that tells how the customer's value is going to be delivered through this solution. And really, it's ultimately looking at it as a driver for sustainable and scalable success. The customer becomes the protagonist of the story, and the elements of the opportunity story need to include the customer's problem, the market size, the industry ecosystem, the competitive landscape, the solution, what it is that you're going to do to address the customer's problem. The secret sauce, what's different and unique from other offerings that are out there. Intellectual property, how are you going to protect this idea? And finally, competitive advantage. Where are the barriers to entry that prevent others from jumping in quickly and repeating what you're doing? The second half of the Pitch Doctor formula talks about the business story. So how are you going to capture customer value and make money? So in this part of the story, money is the protagonist. So what is the revenue model? How does a unitary customer pay for your service or product? That unit economics. And then the marketing, the go-to-market strategy. How will you acquire customers? How are you going to sell to them? What's the pipeline look like? What kind of traction do you have so far, or what kind of traction do you project that you can achieve? Next is competition, direct or indirect, or any potential customers or alternatives that you would have to overcome. Next, financial projections. So this is a stripped down table of revenue and EBITDA. So it's really getting into a very detailed analysis of what the revenues of the business are, the costs, and what that profit's going to look like. Then barriers to entry. Are there patents, trade secrets? Are there strategies that can be used to create competitive advantage? Next, operations and implementation. This is a nuts and bolts outline for how you're going to execute on the top level strategies. With this milestones, this is a chronological list of critical past achievements, but also future targets. So you're really showing yourselves in the middle of a timeline where you've achieved as expected, and now you're looking ahead, hoping to move forwards in alignment with your strategy. Then expansion. How are you going to add additional products? Are you going to create platforms or applications? What markets will you expand to? Are there adjacencies? What other revenue streams can you bring in later as the venture grows? So these are all really meant to point ahead to what could happen in the future as the opportunity grows and as the business gains more traction in the market. And finally, an exit. It's not necessarily have a clear and specific strategy for exiting the business, but it is really important to have some kind of path that would show that this business in the future will be acquirable, or there will be an opportunity for the current investors to exit. That said, the Pitch Doctor strongly emphasizes don't mention IPO, because IPO is a long path, and for most investors, it's much longer than they want to be involved. And so it actually could be a detractor in that case. Next is Guy Kiwasaki's pitch deck template, and it's often referred to as the 30-20-10 template. And that's not evident when you look at the components of it, but the philosophy behind those numbers is that every pitch slide should, if it has any text on it at all, the text should be larger than 30-point font. And that's basically just saying it needs to be big and readable. And ultimately, the words on the screen should not be telling the story. The founder should be telling the story, and whatever words are used are very few and in between. Next, 20 minutes to do the pitch so that you're concise, but at the same time, there's enough detail to gain engagement and interest on the part of investors. And finally, only 10 slides in the Guy Kawasaki model, and you can see those here. So slide number 1 is the title. Slide number 2 is the problem and opportunity. Slide number 3 is the value proposition. What are the pains the customer's having or the gains they're looking for that you can address? Then the underlying magic. What is the technology? That leads to the business models. So slide number 5 is really what is the business model, how you're going to deliver this. Slide number 6 is go-to-market plan. So what is the plan? How are you going to go to market? How are you going to make this all work? Then competitive analysis. Who are the competitors? What are their strengths, weaknesses, and where are your opportunities and threats as a result? The management team. How are you going to build a business that can be successful not just in the startup phase, but going forward into the future? Then financial projections and key metrics. So this is really looking at those numbers and also what the success criteria will look like. And finally, current status. Where is the business today? And then a timeline. What will be the path forward? And with that, what is the use of funds? How are you going to use the funds that you get today to achieve that timeline and to achieve the milestones on that timeline in a way that's going to give the business growth that's going to make the return compelling to investors? And finally, template number 12 is Christopher Lipp's 4-point model. This is a formula for pitching that's a little bit different from all the others. This template's available at pitchpower.org and it's called the startup pitch. Essentially, it has 4 main elements: the problem, the solution, the market, and the business. And then each of these 4 areas are broken down into 3 specific components. So starting with the problem, you have a description of what the problem is. The pain points, so specifically what is it that the customer is experiencing in terms of pain and why are they going to immediately want to do something about it? Trends are also part of the problem. Why does the problem exist in this particular place and time, and what makes this a good time to do something about it? The next segment or the next key element is the solution itself. So first, what is the unique selling proposition? What is different about this solution from any others that's going to make people want to buy it? Next, a demo, actually showing the product, showing the solution, showing the service, showing what it can do. And then finally, the benefits. What is it that the customer is going to experience in terms of a transformed or better life because they purchased this solution or they leverage this service? The third key element is the market. First, who is the specific target market for this product in terms of the customer segment and what is unique about them? And this can be both demographically as well as psychologically or psychographically as it's often called. Then the size of the market. How big is the market? How much money is available for those that are spending money on this? And how much can the company actually seek to gain in terms of market traction? And then advantages in the market. How does this one compare with other competitive offerings that exist? The fourth key element in this model is the business. First, the go-to-market strategy. What are all the different components of taking the product to market that need to be accounted for before it's ready to go into the market? And that's everything from developing the product, confirming the customer, knowing how you're going to get the product into the customer's hand, how you're going to support and service them, and how you're going to really get that interest so that you have a sustainable business over time. The next part of the business segment is the revenue model. How are you actually going to sell the product? How are you going to bring money in? How are you going to make sure that the revenues coming in exceed the costs such that you can have a profit and so forth? And finally, the third section of the business element are the milestones. What are going to be the steps going forward that the business is going to pursue and execute on to make sure that the startup grows and begins to thrive? One of the reasons I like this one is it has a bit of the best of all the different types of models that you see. It's looking at the problem customers have. It's looking at the solution that you're going to deliver. It's looking at the market and how viable it is. And then the business itself. Is there an opportunity for the business to be successful given all these other factors? So what do these 12 models all have in common? Things that you see in most of these have things to do with, who is the customer? What is the problem they're experiencing? What solution are you going to be able to deliver? The business model, the size of the market, how you're going to attain that market, financial projections, the team, competition, and so on. The next question is, how do they differ? Well, one thing, many of them differ just in terms of their order of the way the slides are configured. So even though most of them have similar slides or have a lot of the same slides themselves, they're ordered in a different way, or there's a different emphasis. Some may focus on the customer, some may focus on the solution or the technology, some focus on the market itself, others the team. Some of them focus on different elements like why now? What is it about this particular point in time that makes it the right time for this solution? or that secret sauce. What is it that you're doing differently compared to others that no one else is going to be able to replicate? Or who are the advisors? Are there people involved in this business that are almost sure to help make it a success? And finally, some of them just seem more buttoned up than others. Some of them seem to be very closely connected with a very crisp delivery and very specific and concise factors. Others are much more open-ended or broad-based in terms of what the slides represent, which means the founder has a lot of latitude in terms of how they're going to present it. But there are certainly some differences, and you can see as you look at each of these models how some of them are a lot more involved, they're maybe deeper, some of them are much higher level, some of them focus on different things. So if you look at all of them together, you may be asking the question, well, what do they lack? One thing when you look at most of these, they do tend to lack a lot of depth. And that's kind of the nature of pitching, is that you're presenting a lot of information, but in a very concise way. And usually it's all rolled up to a very high level, almost an executive summary. But you need to be prepared for a pitch that may go deeper. There may be an expectation that you go deeper. It may be the Q&A section is where investors really go deep and they really push you to answer questions. And a lot of times it's at that point, you're going to actually step away from your slides and you're going to be answering based on what you know of the business. The other thing is when you look at these structures and frameworks, you don't see a lot of storytelling. Perhaps with one exception being the pitch doctor, but you don't see a storytelling framework that really draws people in terms of, what's really happening, what's the emotional connection and experience, and what's the result afterwards, what looks different for you, for the customers, for investors. And then finally, style. And when you look at each of these frameworks, you're really just looking at the content in terms of what's on each slide. It doesn't really get into what the slides look like. And there's a lot of latitude here in terms of how you go about it. And sometimes a splashy looking pitch deck can gain a lot of attention in things like a pitch competition, whereas a hardcore investor will see past that pretty quickly or almost find it just distracting or in the way of what is the substance of the pitch. Before I wrap up today, I want to walk through 7 criteria you can use to select the right pitch deck for you. Number 1, the presentation purpose. What is the goal of your particular presentation? And that may actually point you to one of these structures or a combination of them that really address what you're trying to do in a particular moment. If you have 5 minutes to do a pitch, you're going to look for something that's pretty high level and gets right to the point in terms of why you think you're bringing unique value that's going to be successful to the market. On the other hand, if you have a longer period of time to pitch, or if you're working with an investor that really wants to go deep, you may want to choose one of the models that's heavier in terms of its focus and its emphasis and the details that it's providing. Criteria number 2, the stage of your startup. If you're early on with a general idea and you haven't even really fleshed out what the offer is going to be or what the delivery mechanism is going to be, then you're going to have one kind of pitch that really looks at market opportunity and maybe customer problem. Whereas if you're later stage, you may be really looking at traction and go to market and why it is that you think that this particular business is about to explode based on your proven track record and the unique positioning that you have. Criteria number 3 is audience. Who are you going to be pitching to? If you're doing a fun local pitch competition and there's some dignitaries or business owners in the area that are going to be judging your pitch, giving a score, maybe there's a small cash award, then you're not going to need the same kind of detail and depth that you would if you were going to pitch at a tier 1 venture capital firm or private equity where they're really going to be digging in deep and making sure you know what you're doing in terms of understanding the market, understanding the customers, developing and engineering the technology you're bringing to market, and actually presenting it and selling it in the marketplace. So knowing the audience is really important before you choose which kind of deck you're going to use. Number 4 is timing. When is it that you're going to be presenting this information? What are the circumstances? If you're part of an accelerator program where a dozen companies are all presenting at once and you've come through the same program together, you're going to have a particular approach to pitching. That may be very different than if you're going one-on-one to a private equity firm you've been personally introduced into. And so the timing of when you're giving the pitch, where you are in your own life cycle, and just what the circumstances are around it are going to potentially have some bearing on which one you choose. Number 5, the format. the way you're going to be pitching may have a lot to do with the kind of pitch deck that you use. If you're going to be on a stage presenting to a large audience, some of which are maybe judges, some of which are potential investors, and some of which just enthusiastic onlookers, you may have a type of a format that's highly visual and substantive, but at the same time concise and almost at a high energy pace. Whereas if you're sitting down with several analysts with a private equity firm, you're probably going to dial that back a bit and focus on the content and the details of your particular pitch more so than the hype about your idea. Number 6 is related to that, and that's location. Where are you going to be when you present this? Are you going to be on a big stage presenting to a large group of people? Are you going to be in a small room with a lot of people that are almost in like presentation format? Or are you going to be sitting around the table with the small number of people that are highly engaged in a conference room? So your location has a lot of bearing on the type of presentation you want to choose. And number 7, what works for you? You may find that the best pitch deck format or template in the world doesn't really suit your presentation style, doesn't fit well with who you are. And so you've got to find something that you can use that's going to allow you to be authentically you, at the same time convey the message and the details that investors are looking for. So these are just a few criteria that you can use to help decide what the right pitch deck format is for you. And you don't have to just choose one. You can pick and choose the components of each one that best suits your situation and your comfort level so that you put together a pitch that really fits what you're trying to do. So hopefully these 12 pitch deck templates and 7 criteria for choosing the right one for you will give you the opportunity to pitch perfect the next time you're going for investor dollars. And if you want to make sure that your pitch is built on a solid foundation with a game-changing business model, be sure to check out my video, Create Exceptional BMCs in 2 Minutes with AI. Keep going.